If the ancestors were Anglo-Saxons, they would not have possessed a surname for their children to inherit. Normally, Anglo-Saxons only used one personal name, such as Alfred or Edward, but as there were lots of Alfreds and Edwards, and it was difficult to know who was being addressed, they often used additions, such as the Great, the Confessor, or the Elder. Then there was no doubt. If the ancestors were Vikings, their children may have used a parent's name with the addition of son or daughter. Edward II's poll tax returns for Yorkshire has several examples. Agnes, William's daughter; John, William's son; Johanna and Hugh, daughter and son of Thomas; and Roger, son of a parson. If the ancestors were Norman, they often added the names of their estate or place of birth to their first name. A typical example is John, son of Edward II, who was known as John of Elton. The Norman knight Henry de Ferrers, or Henry of Ferriers, used this method. He came from the iron mining village of Ferriers-Saint-Hilaire in Normandy and fought at Hastings for William the Conqueror in 1066. After the conquest, he began a family line in England who continued to use the name de Ferriers. This family gave their name to such places as High Ferrers in Northamptonshire and Woodham Ferrers in Essex. Henry de Ferrers features on the roll of those who fought at Hastings. Also featured is William de Ferrers, who came from another iron mining town in Normandy called Ferriers. It was situated a few miles south of Mortain and ruled by Count Robert, half-brother of William the Conqueror, who was rewarded with large estates in Devon and Cornwall. Some of these manors were later held by William de Ferrers, whose family name survives in the Devonshire villages of Bear Ferrers and Churston Ferrers. By the end of the 11th century, it appears that at least two completely separate families called Ferriers were established in England. Both displayed horseshoes on their coats of arms as symbols of their origins. Their descendants made their mark in history as they rose in power or fell from grace, but it is unlikely that they are the ancestors of several Farrar families who later appeared in Yorkshire. The only thing they seem to have in common is a similar name and the use of horseshoes by those entitled to bear arms. If the ancestors were not Saxon, Viking or Norman, they may have been named after their trade or profession. An early example is Peter le Farrier, or Peter the Farrier, a man who shoes horses. In 1315, he was a tenant of the Archbishop of York at Garton in the Wolds, and he provides a definite connection with horseshoes and ferrier, the French word for iron. As Peter the Farrier lived in the 14th century, it is unlikely that his name would pass to his children, unless they also worked as farriers. Surnames were not hereditary and did not normally pass to their offspring for another 100 years or so. As the need increased for people to be identified more accurately, often because of tax collecting, surnames became essential. By 1400 it is estimated that about 3/4 of the population were using hereditary family names. The account for Selby Abbey has two examples of craftsmen who followed this trend. In 1388, William Farrar was paid 6 for shoeing horses hired at Oxford for brother William Piggott and for taking them to Selby. Some years later, William Farrar was paid 2 shillings and 8 for shoeing horses owned by the Abbey's kitchen. He, or they, if they are the same person, were obviously farriers by trade and using Farrier or Farrar as a surname. They may have adopted the name when it became necessary to have a surname to pass to their children. By 1540, virtually everyone in England was using a regular surname. So today we have such names as Farrar, 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 Fairer, Fairer, Farrow, Farrar and even Pharaoh. But can all these spellings have been used by a single family over the years? Well, that is possible if the wide variety of spellings used by the Farrars who lived at Rothwell in Yorkshire can be anything of a guide. Few people were able to read and write, and those who could were often poor at spelling. This led to inconsistencies. In any case, who was to know how the name should be spelled? The scribes often relied on pronunciation rather than the knowledge of proper spelling when writing deeds, wills, or entries in the parish records. The Farrars of Rothwell, or those who wrote records on their behalf, used such a wide range of spelling that it was difficult to work out their family relationship. Fortunately, one ancestor, Samuel Farrar, made his will and mentions 4 generations, which provided the key for creating a pedigree. He was baptised Samuelus Farrar at Rothwell in 1648, became Sam Farrow when he married Hannah Breton, and when he made his will and signed it with his mark and seal, the spelling Farrar was used for the first time. Once it became Farrar, then the spelling might have been retained. However, his great-grandson, also called Samuel, was educated and did learn to write his name, but his ability to spell is in doubt. Normally he spelt it with ER on the end, but in an indenture it was changed to AH. When his son Henry was married in 1763, both Farrow and Farrar were used on the same certificate. It took another 100 years or so for the name to settle down and become Farrar, but even then errors do occur.